Hey everybody, this episode is sponsored by Resilient Purpose Plus. Resilient Purpose Plus is a video on demand platform designed to increase accessibility to mental health supports and allow you to proactively build resilience in your life. This platform has easy, accessible videos and PDF tools to support your efforts in taking care of your mental wellness and building a resilient mindset. For a low-cost subscription, you will have access to an ever-evolving library of videos that focus on building resilience through self-regulation, developing safe and trusting connections, and learning from your experience. Along with the library of videos, you will also have access to PDF tools and monthly mentorship calls to really enhance your ability to benefit from this platform. Check out Resilient Purpose Plus at resilientpurposeplus.uscreen.io and start your 7-day free trial today. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Purpose Podcast. Today I welcome Tricia Parido. She is a certified life coach and master's addiction specialist, and she is the founder of Turning Leaves Recovery. And so we talk about her journey as a life coach and using her own personal experience with trauma and addiction to help inform her work that she does with others. So we talk about healthy habits, building resilience, how do we transition from higher intensive levels of service to lesser intensive levels of service, and how to navigate all those different transitions that we face in our recovery. So I think it's a very informative episode, and it would be great for you guys to get to know Tricia and enjoy this episode. To be honest with you, I appreciate that. It's nice to have a reciprocal conversation. But where are you from? Are you out in California? Did I read that correctly? So we're in Marietta, Ohio.
Okay. I'm on the central coast of California, so directly between San Francisco and Los Angeles.
Okay. So like San Jose or something.
San Luis Obispo.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm actually in Pismo Beach area. But San Luis Obispo County. Yeah.
Okay. So it's probably a lot nicer than it is here. It's like super cold here. And so I'm sure it's because we honeymooned, my wife and I honeymooned in San Francisco. And I just remember that it's like the same temperature, like all year round, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
pretty much. Our average temperature is 73.
Jeez.
Daytime high.
Right.
So for us, it's been chilly. But I mean, even on our coldest days, like in 60.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll stay in the 50s, but
right. But if that's your worst, then you're doing pretty good. So yeah. For us, I know in some places I have a lot of people that live out, and I have family members in Minnesota and upstate New York. So 60s is like a heat wave, So.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember there was a year that we were in New York on New Year's, and Obama closed everything down. We ended up getting stuck there. We were stuck there. We couldn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
We had to, find a hotel that would house us.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's not fun. So Have you had to adjust? Because you operate do a lot of stuff online, it seems, and I was wondering if you had adjusted with the pandemic, or is that something that you were already doing and kind of?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, I had because I'm international. Yes, I already had some folks that were online, and I had already moved even some of my local clients, because local could be 45 minutes away.
Right.
Who wants to drive 45 minutes for an hour session? So I had already gotten to that space. So I was really only seeing locals in my office. So I did close my brick and mortar. I feel like that did hurt my business some.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, so have I noticed a reduction in clientele? Yes, but I think some of that also has to do with, people just really, being ready to not be doing what they're doing and fit into the program, and want to spend the cash because I'm cash.
Right. True. Yeah. You're different. different market. I know, like, so when we shut down, so Ohio shut down for a period of time, just like I'm sure California did. Um, we waited the longest to shut down our addictions group because a lot of them didn't have access to the technology, the resources to stay. And so we knew that if we didn't bring them in person, that we would lose them. And I think that actually was a huge ramification for people struggling with addiction in our area. We have, like, the adult parole is not even in person anymore. So just too easy for people to kind of disengage from the world and disconnect from what's healthy and what's helping them work through their problems. So that I could see virtual being kind of a tough way because it's
Well, I think
too
it
easy to
depends on the
disconnect.
population, right? I think it depends drastically on the population that you serve. And so, you know, I will take people at various severity levels,
Mhm.
sure, but it does take some significant conversation, some significant time. And so, there's varying ways. So for me, it's not as simple as somebody calling me and saying, hey, I've got a problem, like with our traditional treatment. It's like, let's run the insurance, let's get you approved. It's, let's spend some time having some conversation. Let's make sure that this is a great fit for you. And if it's not, let me help you find what will speak your language, depending upon the severity level. I created Turning Leaves out of my own passion to fill what I view and still view as a gap in service. And I'm an advocate for AA, and I'm an advocate for therapy post-treatment. I'm an advocate for step down into intensive outpatient and outpatient treatment, but it's that assertive continuum of care that I feel is lacking. And what I mean by that is, so you go from, your 30 days to discharge to AA and therapy. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like 30 days. And now I'm stuck with the now what's next. And so now I'm sitting in a room, I don't know, 3 times, whatever it is. We need to help people. And so this is my passion, is to teach people what they didn't know they didn't know, right? That the emotional intelligence that we need, because we're going home to the same house, spouse, kids, bills, jobs, environments that we previously didn't know how to, right? And so that's my big passion. And I've had over a 95% success rate with those folks that come to me directly or within that first month after treatment. Some,
And when you say
have had
you're talking treatment, you're talking like being away from home treatment, like
residential, yeah,
Mhm.
right. I mean, that's my favorite space, is to catch them, afterwards. And so when I refer somebody to go to that, however long the treatment facility
Right.
assesses that they need, because I assess them, but I can't say, hey, here's my assessment, because they have to have their own therapists, do that. But so say 30 days, I refer them to, to go get stabilization, get that 30 days, and then come home. And then we have a touch point every single day. And we're learning the practical application of the psychological tactics.
Yeah.
So, because we talk about it in process group, we talk, and then you go home and it's like, okay, how do I add, edit, delete, change, shift, morph this to actually work in my life?
Right.
And it can be very difficult. I know, because my journey was, so I have well, now it's over 30-year, but 30-year journey with lots of things: trauma, alcohol, eating disorders, benzodiazepines, you name it, right? All driven by a lot of trauma, but a 25-year recovery journey before I even truly got to where I figured it out, because it was, just this constant trying to figure it out. And some things weren't ready to recover at the same time. So anorexia was the first thing. My internet's giving me a little bit of a
cue. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. We heard the audio. Just you're good.
So, I lost my train of thought, but anyway, anorexia was the first thing to go.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness. Right. But then there was, other relationships with food and body dysmorphia and, and then.
So you're talking kind of.
It's been a long road.
The focus. Well, if you don't get to the root, then the coping mechanisms, which are typically maladaptive if you're needing treatment, tend to jump to different options. So if I kind of learn how to, deal with the symptoms of an eating disorder, so I'm not engaging in that, I'm going to often switch to a different unhealthy mechanism or a way to get myself unhealthy reward or
or if you're
way to avoid
all at the same time and you just get rid of one at a time. But I think it's very realistic for people to understand that, putting down the bottle, putting down the bag of processed or refined sugar, putting down your credit card because you're shopping too much, putting down, the marijuana, putting down whatever it is your substance is not actually all that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's a lot of whys underneath there.
Sure.
And, I look at, some of my saving graces were, one, learning what post-acute withdrawal was, what it meant, and then respecting it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, learning about the locus of control theory, because we all, if we're having an issue with an addiction, we're relying on something outside of ourselves to bring us peace, joy, comfort, relief, value, validity, worthiness, whatever it might be. And so we've given an emotional purpose to something that is not an emotional thing, right? And so if I have a reason for pouring myself a glass of wine, an emotional reason for pouring myself a glass of wine, that's an issue.
Right.
People would argue with me on that, but no, it doesn't make a celebration any more of a celebration. Sure, some people can handle it better than others, but it's not designed to make stress go away. It's not, it definitely doesn't help depression because it's a depressant.
Right. Well, it has that. Yeah. And I think it serves avoidance, and I think it's a quick way to not have to deal with the pain. Because I think I've always said this, is that our biggest difficulty and why we have so many mental health problems is our lack of tolerating the discomfort. And so, yeah, and I think what I also kind of hear you saying in the beginning is, when you are at a residential, you have a whole host of staff that are there to help you tolerate the discomfort, but not when you get home. And so that it's those other 23 hours, the other 6 days of the week that you don't have your therapy session. How do you get the strength to tolerate that? So is that kind of what you were referencing to?
Absolutely.
In terms of
because even when you step down into intensive outpatient, and I've worked in every level of addiction treatment. So even when you step down into intensive outpatient, you may be going 2-3 days a week for 3 hours. That's 3 hours. And you get, your one therapy session. That's good. That's a good logical chronological space. But who do you call when your day is going wrong, when anxiety or panic is taken over? Sure, you've got a sponsor. That's great if you need somebody to come keep you from getting out of your car at the liquor store. Mm-hmm. Right. And this is not to downgrade sponsors, but I think there's a fallacy there that they are trained professionals. And even when they are trained professionals, if they're your sponsor, they can't be acting as such. Right. And so you go, if you're emotionally really in a bad spot, who are you going to call? So coaching for me really speaks my language. It speaks my mentality, my behavior, every ounce of my being. I'm not people are like, how come you're not, a licensed clinical practitioner and do therapy? Because that for me, it doesn't speak to my nature. I want to teach you what you need to know. Right? I want to teach you those coping skills and how to make them come like this for you, so that when you get irritated, agitated, and annoyed, you don't necessarily act on that. And you have a way to cognitively have more control over how you are experiencing living.
Right. Well, and I would imagine that you have to kind of recognize, what do I need from different people? So your sponsor serves a certain benefit, but they might not be able to do everything for you. So we talk a lot about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Now, we want our people to have a network of support. It can't be just one person. It can't be just a therapist.
I call it a collaborative team.
Yeah. Because ultimately, at some point, the coach has to go away too in life. And they have to build their sustainability beyond that. And I think what the benefit, one of the things I really like IOP, because we do IOP, we're not a residential program or anything like that, is that you can get a lot of repetition if you do it right. If you give them the right doses of stress to help them deal with what leads to the use, you can build that strength and that capacity, so that when they feel that stress outside of the sessions, they can access those skills. Too often, like in a therapy session, I got them very well regulated, and we just practice like a coping skill, but we're practicing when they're not stressed. And so we actually in therapy focus a lot on, okay, I need to stress you. I'm not going to overwhelm you. I'm not going to throw you off, but I want to stress you. So I'm going to expose you to some type of stressor, and then we're going to regulate as you're being dysregulated, because otherwise you're not going to be able to transfer it. And we deal with that on the mental health side too, right? So they go to a psychiatric hospitalization, they get stabilized, they get regulated, they come back down. It's hard for them to keep it going. So
right. I love all of that, everything that you're saying. And, it brought me a flash when I was a patient care director at a facility. I worked with a lot of the folks right in that transitional space of finishing up their intensive outpatient, because I think every level of addiction treatment is necessary.
Right.
I think
it's a continuum.
The continuum, because post-acute withdrawal lasts for 2 years. That's not to say I keep my clients around for 2 years. I don't. It's anywhere from three to 12 months. And sure, some of, they a la carte it, whatever, come see me if they, have a situation they need coaching through.
Right.
But really setting them up to make it through that first year, that solid first year, so that, a conditioned new way of being can actually be developed in a lot of different areas. And it's not, it's not just about, continuing to talk about why we started to be here. Mm-hmm. It's very right here, right now in this moment, going forward, how do I want to experience living?
Because you're talking about establishing a new lifestyle, right? And so I go back to that, like you were mentioning that your view that people might argue with you about not having to have a drink to celebrate or whatever, is you're creating a lifestyle that most likely bucks up against everything they've ever known and the environments that they're pretty much spending the most time in. Even if they're in a workplace, they have friends that want, or people at the work that say, hey, let's go get a drink after work. And how do we, manage that? And how do we feel comfortable and stuff like that? What do you see as being the biggest struggle I would imagine that the biggest struggle is getting started, or and then once you hit success, once you start seeing progress, I often sometimes wonder, there's often like an experience of, do I deserve this success? Is this okay? I mean, what are kind of some of the patterns you see that get in the way?
Well, what I'm hearing, what I'm hearing you say right now really flashes me to the other primary population that I serve, which are those folks who I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it in maybe two ways, that either don't assess for a level of severity need to go to treatment,
Mhm.
one of the traditionals, or otherwise aren't going to seek treatment. Right. These are the stay-at-home moms, or, the moms and the dads that are highly functioning, and, but they know that their drinking is out of control, right? Like
Right.
they got bottles in their gym bag in the back of the closet, and they're, drinking a bottle of wine during the day while they're vacuuming when nobody's home. They're topping off, or, whatever. These are the folks that are, they're still working. Nothing's hugely negative in their life. Maybe it's causing some relationship strain, but they know that they have an issue. These folks, when they come, often where we start is, I need to get my drinking back under control.
Right.
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 We
Yeah.
start there. And usually by the time they're done with one of my programs, depending upon which one, usually they are so sober conscious that they don't even, again, we remove every purpose that you could possibly have on an emotional level for alcohol, and then there's really no reason to pour one, right? Unless you're having like a really killer prime rib, or
Right.
filet mignon, and it just pairs well, right? So even going out, for a happy hour, we systematically, work them backwards. Now, I will say that I do have some clients that are still active drinkers, but very successfully with purpose, right? Without an emotional purpose. And again, it's all about what the desire is. But, yes, sometimes we have to start from a different space, right? We have to meet them where they are. And sometimes, that abrupt sobriety doesn't necessarily work. I just joined up on a couple dry January groups, just to add in some free value for them, and giving them some tips that what they're going to experience in this 30 days of white knuckling it, right? Because they're all white knuckling it. They sound like they're in pain.
Right.
Most of them, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if I answered your question.
Right. So part of what I'm hearing is that there is kind of differentiation between your coaching versus, okay, you need a different level of intervention based on kind of where are you ready to receive the type of intervention that you're providing. Like there might be some times where you're like, okay, maybe this has to go to a different level.
Yes and yes. So, I consider myself a professional life interventionist. I am a credentialed interventionist.
Right.
I just do them differently than most. I'm sure you could expect based on this conversation. So consider myself a professional life interventionist. And sometimes that's where we start, is in a life intervention process. And it's where we start looking at everything before we determine what needs to happen next.
So more of a global perspective.
Sure. Because again, somebody could tell me, I just need to get my drinking under control. And I assess them as, of having a severe dependence. Yeah. So if we're not matching, if client and I aren't matching, there's a disconnect, and we either need to find a common ground with a stance that we can both, be on board with, or, I have to, make my referrals.
Sure.
And I think that it's really important for everybody to know that, like you said, you may need, different people for different things in your life. And that's 100% true. Um, if we can't meet the client where they are and we're expecting the client to come to us, to come to my space. I might got 9 years, come to my space. We're asking them to jump 9 years forward into a space and into my head and to understand everything that I'm thinking and feeling and how I did it and made it work and all of my years of education. Like I have 13 credentials. I can't actually expect somebody to grasp everything that I've taken because I took it all from the evidence-based practice, from actual lessons and theories, et cetera. And I converted it into a very coaching model. Mm-hmm. So it's very real life, real people words, real practical functions. And that's how I teach it.
But there's an element of what I hear is dosing. So you have to, people can only tolerate a certain amount of stress. And so a 9-year jump is much more overwhelming than a 1-day jump or a
well, wouldn't you
30-minute day jump.
Part of our problem, or maybe not yours. I'm sorry, I don't mean to pull you in there, but I know me, the future tripping, overthinking, mental reels, anxiety-inducing uncertainty, right? Trying to get from A to Z was just so derailing. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I dose my clients. They get 1 module a week. And that generally looks like a lesson, anywhere from 3 to 5 lessons in each module, which means, and then there's milestones, which means there's generally a touch point, something to listen to, something to absorb, something to think about every day. Mm-hmm. And to observe in our life. And so there's this whole way for them to systematically, and they have to do it in order, and they can't move on until they complete that one. It is like that. And I know that sounds rigid, but because I've tried it other ways. I've tried giving people, the ability to go at their own pace. It doesn't work. I've tried starting somebody not at the beginning and starting them midway because I thought that's where they were, or that's where they said they were. And that didn't work either. Right. And I don't have over 95% success rate for no reason. And it's because I have that, that very set structure that I know works over and over and over and over again. But it also can't be self-help because I have to be there to teach people how to add, edit, delete, change, shift, morph, right? Yeah. Because how it was applicable for me could be completely different for somebody else.
People respond to different information differently, or different approaches or tacks, so.
And if they don't get it, and you're not there to explain them to them in a different language, one that they can understand, then it's more of being left to the same thing, like their own recognizances. And if they start feeling like a failure or they can't do something, what does that do to us when we have poor coping? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But anyway, it was really fun. It was really fun being on the learning excursion, being my first client, if you will, because I literally created it out of my journey.
Mm. So you're still learning as you go.
I was then, right? Mm-hmm. So, I started building this 9 years ago, and so 6 years now of solid results oriented. So, it took a couple of years to get it all fine-tuned and tweaked and everything, because I had to figure out what I was using, mm-hmm. and then marry it to that psychological tactic, and then do all the converting. So it started out as a 275-page book.
What are some of the themes that you really focus on, or really think that are important to address? It sounds like there's a lot of kind of what I hear you working on aren't necessarily all directed towards the drug of choice, but is more of a kind of there's like, I know, like in the work of trauma work that we do, we talk about the traumatic event, but we also talk about themes of trauma. So the themes that result from experience of trauma. I don't know if there's an element of themes that you find that are areas that tend to be something that has to be addressed in your journey?
Yeah, the overall theme is creating emotional intelligence, and most people believe that emotional intelligence is an innate thing that we all have, and it's so not. It has to be learned, it has to be cultivated, it has to be nurtured, it has to be grown, and it has to be conditioned. But in that, we have to realize that we are reactive beings, we are impulsive. So we're working on the elements of emotional intelligence that look like impulse control, that look like distress tolerance, that look like emotion regulation, but in very practical facets and features. So it's really a broadening of a perspective. Like when we work on life balance, we look at 14 categories. We don't just look at 14 categories, right? And when we look at the whole health, we're looking at 6 categories to start. And so and we do a lot of other work, very much so learning how to categorize on a cognitive level, the different elements, because people tend to blanketly attach a feeling across the board. I feel like the black sheep of the family. I had a client who had a very large family, but always felt like the black sheep. And by the time we got done making our categories and backing our way through, right, utilizing the cost versus benefit analysis that we use, and just different features that we use specifically, when we got done with it took us about 30 minutes. It was really she only felt that way, that very specific way, with one person. And so it automatically allowed her to renew relationships with the entire family and only have to work on repairing one. And it just made everything seem so much more manageable. So it's about, taking a look at, the filter you use. How are you hearing? How are you seeing? The filter that you hear through and the lens that you see through, and being able to change that in a way that fits you, suits you. I tell my clients all the time, like, how do you want to experience that? When we get a text message, it's in writing. It's up to us to put whatever tone of voice to it we want.
Oh yeah, we were just training on that. I was training teachers today about elements of communication and the neurobiology of communication, and we were talking about how we filter texts or emails and stuff like that, because of our experience is filtering that.
And what because you're teaching your team this, that there are very specific skill sets and tactics that we have to utilize to change how we hear it, or how we see it, or how we experience it. And so there's, I find it to be some of the most important work that we do, is to help somebody, be able to experience it in a way that suits them. Right.
Well, yeah. And to the reactive part. So even if you are interpreting someone's tone or, correctly, even if you're perceiving the situation accurately, how we react and respond to it is also key. But oftentimes we're misperceiving other people's intentions, or applying different labels or beliefs about why someone is doing what they're doing.
Sure.
So
if we don't remove reactivity and get responsive in our life, it's going to be really, really tough to maintain, sobriety.
Well, you have to also be able to reflect, because that's not something that's naturally able to be done. So you have to also be somewhat stable and regulated to be able to reflect effectively.
Sure. Taking that time to pause. And a lot of people don't even have that capability. And there's something that it's actually one of the very first things that we work on cultivating is the art of pause, because people don't give enough space in their life to even know how they truly think, feel, or believe about something before they're vomiting out, right? They're not even listening or seeing with the intention of understanding. They're getting ready to give their answer or to give their reaction or to give an emotion. And we really got to let things marinate a little bit more.
Well, that you're wanting the product before you go through the process. So you're wanting to get to the outcome. You want to finish the race before you've even
Yes,
gone halfway or started it.
Yes, all that future trip and anxiety.
Yeah. So I would imagine you focus a lot about staying present or being in the moment. And
yes, but also just, very much so being one mindful, right? It's one thing to have a booked calendar and were a lot of things on your I want to do list, or a lot of goals, but that's okay so long as you can focus on what's the task at hand right now. Like when we get finished here, I'm going to have to go back to my calendar to see what's next, because I literally I work really hard all the time about being very one mindful. So when I show up somewhere, I'm there, I'm present, I'm in the moment, I'm engaged in the conversation. I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm not, worried about what's next week or any of those kinds of things, because how can we, if we're so fragmented, how can we actually have a calmness, right? My calendar's booked for the next 2 weeks, but right. But I can say that this is your space. This is my time to be here doing this. And it's important. And it's important for me and my recovery journey, or my recovery lifestyle to be able to operate that way, so that I'm not frazzled and stressed, because that hurts me on a lot of different levels. It hurts me emotionally, it hurts me physically, it hurts my relationships, it changes my environment, all the things. I mean, it affects my dog.
Your dog can sense it.
Well, if I'm walking around all stressed out like a crazy lady,
yeah,
like, and I don't prefer to see myself that way, right? I get to choose. So, I mean, my motto through all of this has, for myself is, this is my life too. It gets to look, feel, be however I want it to, right? So that automatically in and of itself removes comparison. It removes judgment. That's another big one right there. But is, we go through life in the stance of a judger. We don't think we do, but we do. And we need to get into this more open space of operating in a stance of a learner, where we can seek for deeper understanding. Doesn't mean that we're going to change our viewpoint, opinion, our morals, our ethics, our beliefs, or anything like that. But there's no harm in having a deeper understanding. Even if we still believe that it's wrong, it's okay. Because if
listening doesn't mean you agree or that you are following their way of thinking or believing.
No, but you'll have a much better time living on a planet where there are a bunch of unique individuals, because there are a lot of different. I mean, if you you take religion, there's a ton of different religions. You don't judge one right or wrong. That's theirs. That's for them to decide. That's their life. They get to choose. I get to choose mine.
And that goes back to the rigidity that we were talking about earlier. Is that we're going to live best if we can recognize that there's value in both sides of the coin, that there are other options, that you could actually make your, we talk about this a lot, or I don't know if I've had conversations with a friend that is really spiritual, and he kind of has struggled in his journey with kind of religion, in the sense of kind of recognizing the role of mental health in religion. And so being able to kind of identify that you can have both. And in fact, if you have both, you'll probably enhance both settings. So if you take care of your mental health, you become better practitioner of spirituality. If you are
whatever spirituality is to you,
right? Whatever it is to you,
and
if you practice good spirituality for whatever is good for you, that can help you benefit in the mental health world in terms of taking care of your mental health, because you can use the values that you get from there to help you build your mental wellness. And so that kind of, but we have to be open to listening and seeing each other's values rather than shutting down.
That goes across the board and into a lot of different areas. And I call it add, edit, delete. And it's actually, we have specific places in our process where we review, add, edit, delete. And it's the same when you go to a treatment program, you go to residential, intensive outpatient, and you're gaining all of this knowledge, this input, you're getting these tools, right? You're getting all of these tools. And it sounds like you spend some time with this, but when you go home, you have to learn how to add, edit, delete, make it your own so that it fits into your life. And a lot of times people don't understand that. I use this analogy quite frequently. So you read a self-help book and it's a great self-help book, but if you don't implement it, it's going to do nothing for you.
Right.
And there are people that'll go, oh, I went to Tony Robbins' thing and all those people in my group did great and all of this is wonderful, but nothing's happening for me. Well, here's the thing is they figured out how to incorporate it into their life versus trying to incorporate their life into somebody else's method or modality.
Right.
Because when we try to do that, then there's things that are, missing or don't match correctly or don't apply or, whatever. But we always want to be incorporating things into our life, not our life into something else. It's like codependency. When you get so rigidly attached to whoever it is that your world crumbles if they're not there or they go away, or if, two people in recovery, this is why we tell them not to do it, because if you get enmeshed and codependent, if one falls off the wagon, the other one is going to. It doesn't have to happen that way if you don't get codependent.
But it's very awkward and uncomfortable to try if one starts to fall off the wagon for the other person to stay. Yeah.
I'm definitely not advocating for it, but
yeah. Well, so I worked years ago, I worked in a residential program and I would run substance abuse groups with kids and I know that a lot of staff would frequently say, you got to get rid of this friend. You can't be with this person and you need to go find better friends. And all of that is probably true in its kind of logic, but in the reality of implementation, that is really hard because it's not like, these kids that are removed from their environment because of the mistakes that they've made and the problems they've had and go in, they're just not going to walk in and be able like, okay, let me find the honor roll student, who's in choir and I'm going to connect. And so we often we also often misunderstand that we have to help them navigate their environment in a way that's going to be effective. And so simply saying you can't, be with this person is not going to work because they will have there's skills involved in that to be able to say, hey, listen, I know you're struggling.
And limitations,
right?
Like if we have limits and limitations and we could say, if we teach them, which I think is very important, to teach them how to adjust the relationship.
Right.
Right. And so if we're saying, oh, I can't be your friend anymore because you still drink and whatever. I have lots of adult women that we have this conversation. It's about shifting the relationship and having it, function differently when you're spending time with that person. And that really just takes having, the strength to have that organic conversation, that genuine conversation of saying
there's a lot of skills involved in that need to be built.
There's a lot of skills involved in that. You do have to have healthy limits and limitations. Mm-hmm. You do have to have those communication skills. Assertiveness is a must.
Sure.
And just being able to operate from an intuitive space, getting into that wise mind, if you will, if you want to go into that mindfulness based language, getting into wise mind is really great and it's important. But yes, limits and limitations, are great. And being able to, draw those lines in the sand and say, I love and value our friendship. I don't want that to go away. These are my limitations for me.
Mhm.
Right? This is, and being able to do that. But yes, you have to work on getting there.
Right.
And it takes time.
Yeah. Well, and too often we can fall back into our kind of autopilot, when we're around people. So it's so easy for us to kind of fall right back into the way we were with that person, because it just, the brain prefers what's familiar. So we fall into, to what's familiar and not what's good, for us. So, and that becomes a definite challenge. So how do you find yourself working with other entities? Do you find that that's you said a collaborative, like who are kind of groups or people that you incorporate into your collaborative team, I think is what you were talking about?
I have, depending upon where people are, right? So, I do have a few psychs that I prefer to work with,
Mhm.
when I can. And so we will work together there. Therapists that are, primarily, trauma focused, that don't necessarily work in addiction or have training. I do work with quite a few therapists that will say, hey, can you help my client, start living in the now going forward while we're over here? Because once a week, twice a week, the therapy,
Working on
it's
the
not
past,
enough. Like
yeah.
they need to get up off the couch, they need to whatever it is, right? And so, I work really well in that space. Treatment facilities generally, there are a few that will, definitely, when it's the right client, like, pass people along. It's not just a blanket,
Right.
right? Like we've spent time cultivating a relationship to where, they're pretty good at knowing who's a good fit, and they rightfully so, right? Like, because I certainly won't speak everybody's language.
Yeah. What type of language fits best for the stuff that you do?
Wow. I would say definitely, very, very solution focused, motivated, even if high severity, as long as there's that motivation and
Mhm.
willingness to learn, and a desire to move forward,
Mhm.
right? Like there's a population of people out there that really like to ruminate, wallow in language,
Yeah.
and um but also, those folks that, again, if they're not ready, you know then they're better suited for a higher level of care. If they're just not ready, and it's going to be a constant, chasing.
Right. Are you familiar with, I'm
Constant
assuming,
chasing is not in my dialogue.
so you would say, I mean, like if you go back to like the theory of change, like they're at contemplation, they're not at pre-contemplation for you. Like that's a harder place to start if they're not at
I
that point.
will. I will, if they're at pre-contemplation, again, but there's a fine line with that pre-contemplation. Again,
Mhm.
I just need to get my drinking under control.
Right.
You know,
There's still
versus high
contemplation. It's just
severity,
not all the way there. Yeah.
I'm still on the streets using heroin. Like that's not a good fit.
Right. Right.
Like I'm going to have to refer them to detoxification, stabilization, intensive outpatient. If they're that high severity, they've got, so now I work with a lot of people that have, been in and out of recovery for a significant amount of years and have
Mhm.
had long-term sobriety. So they know what it is already.
Right.
Well, even though they're active right now, like I will work with them because they already know what it can look like.
Right. No, and they're probably further along in that continuum as well, even though they're in a bad place or struggling. So,
Yeah.
so you incorporate kind of a lot of like a motivational interviewing, trying to get them to kind of engage. Because I'm hearing a lot of homework too, or things that they have to do outside of the session, or things that, because you're
Really a
wanting
lot of
them to
homework.
engage.
It's not
Maybe
really a lot of homework. It's pre-recorded to save them money. Back in the day, I met with my clients 3 times a week,
Mhm.
and hourly sessions can rack up pretty
Yeah.
quick. And so
You're giving them doses throughout the week through.
pre-recorded, so it's dosed. It gives them something to observe. There are worksheets. Some people do them, some people don't. Everybody's different, right? So I meet them where they are. Some people like to journal, other people hate it, So there are lessons that are pre-recorded to listen to. Absolutely.
Right.
And then there are sessions to be had.
And then you process that afterwards.
Yeah, and personal observation. Some folks will come, when they first start, they'll come twice a week. It just depends. It's very, very much tweaked to the individual person. We text, we have a platform we can communicate on. We have all the things.
Right.
So,
finding ways to engage, which is now becoming more relevant than ever at this point in time in our life.
So we have a coaching corner where, their milestones are. It's where they can also upload worksheets if they want to share them. They can just type a message. They can make themselves notes if they want to just not forget things, right? Because, if you don't show up to a session with specifics, or we're playing, hey, how was your week? And then we get to something and it's the last 15 minutes, so they'll utilize that. And then where the primary lessons are is where, worksheets are available to them. And then, again, text message, for those more immediate needs.
Mm-hmm. So, and I also noticed on your website, or just kind of looking through your platform to a certain degree, that there's an emphasis, at least I've seen, on habits. Can you speak a little to your focus on habits and what your kind of process is with that?
Everything is better when you live life without habits. And people are like, well, what do you mean? It's back to that resiliency, back to that flexibility, back to that, softer version of the self. So there's a couple things with habits. I utilize the word habits because I work with people that have addictions that are not chemical in nature. Mm-hmm. So I studied all things process, behavioral, and chemical addiction, in my degree studies. And so shopping, that's a habit, it's a habit to go out and, go out for 3 things and to, put a bunch of stuff in. There's other things that are habitual. So, what is it and how is it negatively impacting your life? Mm-hmm. Is it controlling you, or are you controlling it? If you can't miss your 6 a.m. spin class without your whole day unraveling, that's an issue. Right. We ought to be able to just go, well, my daughter's sick. I can't go to 6 a.m., but I can go to the 6 p.m. when my husband's home and he can take over, and have it be great, fine and dandy, wash our hands and move on. Or
I can't make the 6 a.m. class and it's okay, and I'll pick it up another day.
I could just miss it. It's all cool. It's whatever, right? Like life continues to unfold. And that's one of the reasons why I have Strengthening Your Resilience Life Unfolding is available to all my clients inside whatever program they're doing, because it's 31 episodes of resiliency training, because life continues to unfold. And I recorded it at the onset of COVID. Okay. And so, it's very useful and very helpful. And it came at a time where we all needed it. Mm-hmm. And so I needed it. So I made it. And so while I was doing it in my life, I just recorded it. And so it's very much just something that I recorded as I was doing it myself. It's pretty awesome. If I don't say so myself, I listen to it when I need it. I just don't watch the video portion.
Just the audio.
Just listen to the audio.
You tell her your voice better.
But, and I'm realizing that, I do have a 12 o'clock, but, we can, negative attachments, addictions, and the habits that hold us hostage can all be shifted, changed. And so I find when a lot of people that have the chemical addiction also have other habits. Sure. And so again, we want to dive into all of that. And so if you're going from, residential to intensive outpatient to outpatient to coaching, hopefully, some sort of an assertive continuum of care. I like to overlap with outpatient or intensive outpatient because I consider my program to accentuate it and to be helpful to the practitioners. And that's been the feedback anyway from the intensive outpatients that I've worked with, is that it's been very beneficial for the clients. And anyway, I just like to, to help people figure out how they can, create the lifestyle that they'd like to experience.
Right.
So they can.
Well, Tricia, thank you for your time. I appreciate engaging in these types of discussions and hearing different points of views and different approaches, and coaching is definitely, is an element that I think is impressive because it can add other doses of connection for people that are struggling and in need. So thank you for sharing. Do you quickly want to just say where people can find you?
I guess, I didn't even think of that. I didn't mention it, but yes, my name is Tricia Parido, and I'm the owner of Turning Leaves Recovery Life and Wellness Coaching. So the website is turningleavesrecovery.com. That's LEAVES. And that's just probably the best way. Just click the contact, send me a message.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care. Have fun with your next appointment. And thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.